Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Kids Media Club podcast. I'm Andy Williams.
I'm Jo Redfern, and Emily, we have a guest today. Please introduce our guest.
Yeah, we have a guest, Chris Heatherly, another Disney alumni like me, who is going to get into a topic that came up actually originally on this podcast a few weeks ago, Club Penguin, when I just then spiraled into a massive Club Penguin hole. But Chris was there for the whole thing, and he's done lots more since. So you're very welcome, Chris. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Chris Heatherly. Thank you for having me on. I've been in games, media, and entertainment for over 25 years. I was at Disney for 14. Half of that, I ran their toy business. Half of that, I ran parts of their games business, including Club Penguin, where I was general manager for probably about 7 years in one form or another. And then I eventually, in addition to Penguin, took over their mobile gaming business. And grew that. Then I was at Universal for about 4 years and built a games business for them. And then subsequent to that, I've worked in a variety of startups. My background really has always been in tech and innovation. So I tend to focus on skating where the puck is going, which means you either are, which means often you're too early. Which I've done a lot. But I've done a lot of things in gaming and media and definitely in the kids media space from my years at Disney and Club Penguin. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's so great to have you. And actually, that whole concept of was it too early could nearly apply to Club Penguin. So I went down a massive Club Penguin hole recently. Obviously, it was
a Club Penguin hole. It's giving me the.
Joe Redfern, that's a you problem. I went down. I looked into this in depth. Is that a better corporate way of putting it? Recently, Club Penguin was a multiplayer game that Disney bought in the early 2000s. I want to say. Really had, it was adorable. You had your penguin avatar, you had your house, it was customizable. There were worlds that you could explore. It really had safety at the heart. I know at my time at Disney, there was the team down in Brighton, the moderation team and stuff like that. So it really had safety at the core. And it's it came up in conversation that we were having a few weeks ago. And, I was looking into it and we were talking about it and looking back, it actually could have been Roblox before Roblox was Roblox to a certain extent, or it could have been Minecraft before Minecraft was a Minecraft. So, tell us a bit about those days, Chris. Like what happened and what went down.
Well, there's a lot packed into that. I was one of the first people that I got involved with Club Penguin when I was running the toy business and had been pushing us to do toys that were based on games or interactive. It had some games component. Webkins was really big at the time. And we made a play for Club Penguin. And I was one of the first people to go up to Kelowna, Canada after we bought it and just really hit it off with the CEO at the time, like Merrifield. He's still one of my best friends. I had a dinner with him just the other week. So I see him, all the time still. I did the Club Penguin toy line to start. And, we did a lot of innovative things including putting codes on toys, which wasn't really being done a lot at that time. Webkins was sort of doing it. But we did it more at an economy level where, you would buy a toy and be able to unlock that costume in the game. It was pretty innovative for the time. And we built a game called Card Jitsu that was very successful with Topps. That was a trading card game that for a period of time was outselling Pokémon at Toys R Us. Admittedly, at that time, Pokémon was kind of on a low ebb, and and we did.
Pokemon Go hadn't happened yet.
Pokemon Go hadn't happened yet, but we were outselling them for about 9 months, maybe a year. So we had a lot of success early on. And then from the toy side, the founders had made quite a bit of money and sort of some of them had started moving on, and Lane was sort of had the notion that he was taking on more stuff, and but eventually probably was gonna leave Disney and do his own thing, and so he wanted to be able to pass his baby off to somebody that he trusted, and I guess he trusted me. So I wound up running Club Penguin. I actually ran it probably longer than the founders by about a year.
Sorry to interrupt, Chris. When was that? When did you take over then? What year?
I took over. I started getting involved with it on the development side in like 2011. Club Penguin was created in like 2006, 2008. I think we bought it in 2008 or 2009, something like that. And then I got involved in 2011. So, and it lasted until I think Disney shut it down in like 2017 or something like that. And I had left. It's actually one of the reasons I left is because I refused to shut it down. We could get into all of that. I mean, I just think that for a lot of reasons that I could go into and probably write a book about, like, Disney was just extremely short-sighted about gaming, and had made, I think, trusted the wrong people and invested a lot of money poorly, and kind of bet on even projects like Disney Infinity that were cool, but didn't really have the depth that you would think that they would have, and they just massively overspent on it. And so it just seemed like everything that Disney did in gaming sort of went sideways at some point. And our business, the business that I was running, got better and better, and we were able to do a big turnaround on it. But by the time that we did that, there just wasn't a lot of appetite for more gaming. And I think with Penguin, we could kind of talk about sort of why it was ultimately shut down, but a lot of it was just technology. It was there was a lot of corporate stuff that killed it, and I think that was the biggest driver. Just kind of like short-sighted corporate sooty people who didn't understand how special it was. But also, just the phone, right? Changing everything. We never kind of successfully, we launched on mobile, but never recreated the success over there. At Steve Jobs killing Flash, like sort of all of those things. And Club Penguin was built by, a bunch of like artists who could code, not engineers. So the tech was actually pretty broken, and it just got worse over time, and trying to run it and grow it and fix it and go to mobile and just all of that, and then a bunch of other corporate stuff just sort of collapsed from its own weight. Because I feel like there was a core there that was special.
We bought it in 2007. Like, definitely in my era, it was really treated as like a marketing platform as opposed to like a platform within itself. There was things like the Star Wars party. They were putting Marvel characters in there. But at its peak in 2013, it had 200 million registered avatars, I think, right? Like, that's like a big, that's like a
no, it was a huge community. It was a huge online community. It was a huge online community. And, we were doing, for a, concurrency wise, we were doing, sometimes 300,000 concurrents, something like that. And, if you look at like a game like Resident Evil or something, like that's the kind of concurrency that's doing. So, the problem was that no one understood gaming in those terms at that time, right?
Did they also understand? Do you think there was an issue with a corporate mindset not maybe understanding building community at that point and the value of community over kind of short-term profits?
I had suits tell me what's the value of community, right? What's the value of community? What's the value of the network? Can you quantify it, right? And I was like, well, look at the, market cap of Facebook, right? Like, it's not, that's predicated on community. It's not predicated, but you're talking about linear television and film executives, and maybe not even that, mostly people who like come from, MBAs who parachute into the strategy group at Disney and, never work in as operators, but all they know how to do is look at spreadsheets. And so, they're, and they were going to get promoted by, cutting us to a million pieces, not, helping us grow and be more successful. It's always easier to cut than it is to grow. Right. And so people without vision or talent will always, and sometimes you have to cut to grow, right? I'm not against that. I cut a lot in club,
but it's understanding what you can cut and grow, and I think that requires quite an intimate understanding of what you've purchased. Really, it reminds me a little bit of when Rupert Murdoch bought MySpace, and then I think just had no real understanding of the value of that, or how to kind of leverage that platform.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple. I mean, I'll give you a couple examples. One thing I want to say that needs to be said is that Club Penguin was like, it's kind of like this legend now, or this like, kind of like people talk about like Camelot or something, and it was all real. That team, what I loved about working with that team is everyone woke up every day focused on the kids and making the best play experience for the kids. And we were listening, Lane really trained us all to listen to the audience. And, most of our best ideas came from the audience. Like that Card Jitsu card game I talked about was based on a meme kind of legend that the community came up with around. There were a bunch of like blotchy images in some of the early art, and it was because our artists were they had a charm, but they were sort of amateur artists, right? And in the beginning, and so the blotchy kind of things that were like shadows or whatever, the kids started speculating, oh, those are ninjas. And so ninjas became this huge lore. And so when we wanted to create this card game, one of the co-founders, Lance, said, let's do the ninjas. The kids have been wanting this for a long time. Let's just do it. And that's where Card Jitsu came from. And we did this, funny, silly card battle game. And it just took off, right? And I don't think that Disney really understood the ability to use a platform to do that without having to, drive it on television or film or whatever, but being able to have a platform to launch new IP and launch new IP like that. But the audience was the team was very motivated, but was really there to keep it safe and to serve the audience. And to your point about like, do you know what you bought, and then keeping it special? Like we had a huge team of moderators, and but they were also a huge cost. And a lot of what they were doing was like, not necessarily. I mean, there was a fair amount of like, going in the world and making sure it was safe and kicking people off who were doing inappropriate things. And there was a whole side to that of like kids, threatening suicide or reporting, sexual abuse at home, or, there were all kinds of things like that where, we were constantly working with law enforcement to keep kids safe. But there was a whole other side of it, which is a lot of what the moderators did was respond to kids' emails, do appearances in game, do like community building stuff. And the idea that kids could get an email from a mod was like, oh my gosh, they listened to me. They recognized me. They sent me, they responded to me. And that made a lot of kids feel very special. And I think that as the cost hammer started to swing and you lost a lot of that kind of like, the people on the other end who were talking to the fans, maybe, you could say, well, it's not scalable, and that, it was a big cost, and, often a debilitating cost, but it also is what made it special. And so, and you know, I still think about, I wish there had been a way to like preserve all that and get it to the other side of his business, you know?
Yeah. It's hindsight is a wonderful thing, but I think in this case, you're calling out some things that we know now to be true, that at the time, the execs at Disney doubted, which was UGC. You just said the audience came up with the idea for Card Jitsu. It was UGC. Now, at the time, the technology didn't facilitate that feedback loop that you can get slightly more immediately now when you've got Discord servers or you've got groups on Roblox. But actually, it came from them, and we know how important that community is and feeling invested in game dev or updates now, fast forwarding, 10, 12, 13 years after it happened in Club Penguin. I think that's really interesting. You know, precursor to UGC and a big misunderstanding at the studio exec level of what that means and how powerful that is and how important to users. But what I really love is something that you said before that I think I see coming back now is these weren't necessarily computer science engineers. They were artists who knew how to code.
Yes.
And that very often results in something that is much more appealing. Because if you're a pure technologist and you're just creating because the technology is allowing you to do something, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be good. And I like the idea that it was the artists that, the difference between Club Penguin and maybe Disney Infinity, which was very much a technology play, but didn't necessarily work, but something that perhaps didn't feel as technologically forward as Club Penguin, but was driven by artists with a passion who had a connection with their audience. Now we look back at it and we wouldn't class Disney Infinity, or we wouldn't look at it with the same, what's the word that I'm looking for, that kind of same love as Club Penguin still inspires today. I was watching TikToks, even now, of people just lamenting the loss of Club Penguin.
No, there's a massive community that still is involved in Club Penguin. There are still bloggers who blog about or Twitter accounts that talk about it. There's still there's nostalgia videos that come out all the time. People send to me. There are pirate servers that are running today that have more people playing Club Penguin than ever played at the height of Club Penguin. And in fact, they have their own kind of lore and mythology that's evolved beyond Club Penguin. I mean, what's interesting is like, I think, in my brain, like, I think I know Club Penguin because I, helped create a big part of it. But there's a whole decade or more that happened after my time that happened on these pirate servers that now kids and, and young adults who are still playing Club Penguin online, or these pirate servers, like there's stuff in those that has nothing to do with what I was doing, and lore and characters and things that's lived on. I mean, and I'm constantly getting, I don't think he'd mind me saying this, like Logan Paul is a huge fan. I've gotten to know him because of Club Penguin, and he's a huge fan of Penguin and wanted to find a way to bring it back. Tyrese Halliburton the other day, who's a big athlete, put out like 2 months ago, tweeted something about Disney really, effed up by shutting down Club Penguin. And then Tyrese and Logan and I were like cross chatting about it. Like they're like, it touched a whole generation, and and, for a generation that's sort of like, you think about if you're in your 20s now, which my kids are, right. And they grew up with me on Club. They were right at that age, Club Penguin age, and they grew up with me on running Club Penguin. And, that generation has seen, the 2008 financial crash. They've seen, COVID. They've seen, just a world gone mad, right? And so Club Penguin is like this for them. I think this oasis in their heart, in a way. It's like this, this little, island of youthful innocence, right? And something that Lane and I used to talk about is our job was to protect the innocence of the audience. And that a lot of what gaming and culture wants to do is sort of, is to sort of push more mature culture on younger and younger kids. And that our job was to protect that innocence for as long as we could. And, I'll never forget, we had this girl, and I'm blanking on her name. I can't believe I'm blanking on her name, but that we did in a focus group one time. And she was like this, girl with big kind of Coke bottle glasses or whatever. And, and she said, at school, I'm not the most popularist one, but on Club Penguin, I can be who I want to be. And people like me for who I am. And we took that clip and we were like, that's really the heart of what we're trying to do here. And so like everyone else, like Moshi Monsters and, everyone else kind of ripped off. And I have a lot of respect for Michael, and he went on to do Calm and, great things, but, he's a billionaire now and I'm not, but Michael did a great job with Moshi Monsters, but Moshi and some of those other things that kind of knocked off Club Penguin, they knocked off the kind of superficiality of like, oh, we're going to have an avatar and mini games and all this other stuff. But they never captured that heart. Like, I don't think that there's nostalgia for, no disrespect to Moshi, which I think was a great competitor, but there's not the same nostalgia for Moshi or for any of those other, like a bunch of them came after Club Penguin that I don't even remember, right? And I think that none of it had to do with our technology or like our gameplay. It all had to do with the community and the heart of the product.
Fine. So you think the nostalgia, that spark of nostalgia arose out of that, the time and place and that community that was brought together as much as any of the other elements to it.
Yeah, I think it was about giving kids a safe. I mean, I used to say, like, I run the biggest playground in the world, and so my job is to keep it safe and, and to keep it fun, right? And that's what and to give the kids something to do. And, every now and then, like, there was this blogger, Sarah April, who was always very critical of Club Penguin, but she kind of kept us on her toes. And, I remember one time on Twitter that the community was like just dogpiling on her, because they didn't like all our negativity. And I was like, guys, you got to get off her. Like, I'm really disappointed in what I'm seeing out here because this is not what we stand for. And like, I would have to be the parent, with all these online kids. And so, but what I found is like, you can appeal to their better angels, not just their worst instincts. And I think a lot of media just wants to, doesn't believe in better angels really, or thinks it's like superficial kind of, happy talk. Like, a lot of media is too cynical to actually believe that something could be good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, there's a lot of virtue signaling, like people talk, kind of politically virtue signal or whatever. And like, like even with our charitable giving, like we gave millions of dollars to charity. One year we donated $2 million to charity. And we always did it through this thing called Coins for Change, which the kids would vote with their in-game money for. They would play games, earn money to vote on their charities. And they were always very, very generous and very egalitarian about it, where they wanted to make sure all the charities got funded to the same degree. And as we went over time, we started to make it more overt, where it's like, in the beginning, it was like you're funding a cause. And then over time, we made it more clear, like you're funding libraries, you're funding schools, you're funding playgrounds, and there's kids who, learned or got clean water, or, some of the things we didn't tell people is like, we would fund a lot of the projects like victims of childhood victims of sexual and like violent abuse in Africa that were not sexy charities for big corporations to give to, because they want to be aligned with like feel good kind of causes, right? even with the charitable giving, like we had a woman who was completely dedicated to going to all those places and making sure the money was spent the right way and having impact. Like we were completely focused on impact and making sure that the kids felt that they were having impact. And it wasn't just kind of like corporate, like kind of good washing, it was like,
I wasn't lip service.
I think that's another example of a place where, compared to the rest of Disney, like our charitable giving was like light years ahead of what they were doing. Like Disney was just writing money to politically interested kind of NGOs and stuff and not really making sure if it was being spent well and, all this other stuff. And we were like on top of it. And I think that, there's something about, I've gotten very jaded over the years about kind of corporations that want to appear to be doing good, because I think most of it's a scam. But Club Penguin wasn't. And I think there's a lot of people who don't, in media today, especially, it's just become so hard and cynical that people don't believe you can do anything good, but you can, if that's your business.
Yeah. I'd love to talk a bit about the safety element, because I feel like that's something that is still unsolved 20 years later, right? So what were you guys doing? Obviously, there was extensive in-person moderation, chat filters. I mean, is it still all the same things that we know today, or why do you think it worked on Club Penguin?
Well, I mean, we had all the same problems that Roblox has, right? I mean, there were constantly child predators trying to get access to kids. We had, racist penguins that were, would, change their, like, they would decide their color was going to be red, and then they would go around and they would say to all the other kids in the room, "You're green, you need to be red, change to red or get out of here," and, there were all kinds of, whenever you create a platform, especially for young people, bad people are going to try to come into that space, and it's a forever game of whack-a-mole. And so I feel I've been supportive of Dave and Roblox because I think they get unfairly maligned, and just because I know how hard it is, and they've got far better technology than I had available at that time. And a lot of what we did was the things that, in some ways it's like the really brutal tools are the most effective, right? So like, one was, we just heavily censored speech in Club Penguin. And, that's something that as a more libertarian minded person, when it comes to, my own communications on adult social media, I'm very concerned about censorship. But I think you have to do that in a kid space, right? And I draw a distinction between adults and kids, we heavily filtered, right? We had what was called fake send, which was probably one of the most effective things, which is that you could say, if it was really bad, like you dropped a curse word or a known racist word, like if it was like let's say 90% bad, you would just get banned. And that was a very effective tool because kids didn't want to get banned, right? And still one of the beams around Club Penguin is, I got banned, right? It was kind of became a joke. But fake send was, if it was sort of like, maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, but it's probably iffy, let's just err on the side of caution, we would let you type it and it would appear on your screen, but it didn't go out to other people. And and what we found is, if people weren't socially rewarded for trolling and for being, for bullying, then they just stopped doing it. And so, banning fake send and filtering were really our three tools. And then moderation, right? But moderation was, we could only respond. There were so many like igloos, and we'd have people who, there's a thing in games called TTP, which is if you which is time to penis. So if you make a any kind of UGC tool, like one of the first things somebody is going to do with it is make some kind of phallic symbol or swastika. And we constantly do that, and if we get reported. And so, when I see these reports on Roblox and it's like, Chris Hansen goes online and finds salacious, terrible content in Roblox. Oh my gosh, like somebody made a Nazi game or something. Like what they're not telling you is maybe 5 people saw that before it got reported or caught. And as soon as it got reported or caught, it got pulled down. So, you're asking for a level of like pre-crime and prescience that, that is impossible, right? Part of what here's the real thing going on with the kids media conversation, to be honest, which is there is a group of people out there that are activists who want to censor the internet. They have their own reasons for doing it. A lot of them are political or about control. And they use this kid predator narrative to push stuff like online verification and a bunch of these laws that in the end probably are not going to do anything to keep kids safe, but are going to lead to a more Orwellian internet for all of us. And I really despise that because they're not being honest about their aims. Some of them, and I've talked to some of these people because I know them from my days, and some of them think they're doing the right thing, but they're just incredibly misguided. But a lot of them, if you press them, will say, well, actually, we think everyone needs to live under this kind of Club Penguin, very draconian, kind of, regime. And my thing is like, look, what I think is appropriate for the world's largest playground is not what's appropriate for adults discussing the future of their country, right? And so we have to allow for kind of different rules for different spaces and different audiences. And so I don't like how the conversation has been distorted that way. And I think that a lot of what's going on with Roblox is, frankly, those people who are trying to push the online verification thing like crazy right now, but it's not going to end with that, because they want all kinds of controls on all kinds of things on the internet. And it's just a never ending list. And in the UK, you're seeing this, all over the place. Or it's short sellers who just want to short the stock. So I've looked into Roblox, and look, I'm not an expert. I do know Dave. I've talked to him a little bit, but I've researched what they do on the moderation side, and I don't see any major holes that I'm like, oh, like you guys are obviously not doing that. Like, I think it's more a case of like, it's really, really hard and no one else is doing it at this scale. And frankly, he's got a bigger social online audience than all games combined. He has CPU bigger than Steam. So he's dealing with a community at a scale of like a Facebook or Instagram or whatever that's never been seen in a game anywhere before. And people are trying to hold him to the perfect standard. And I think sometimes he gets grumpy in his public communications, and you really can't. But you need to be transparent, I think. But I want to defend them because I do feel like they try and they put a lot in place, and frankly, they have a lot more in place than a lot of other people on the internet.
Oh, they do.
And do you think that in some ways where they've succeeded in terms of their moderation, and do you think that's partly come in response to pressure around kind of children on the internet, and that's become much more of an amplified conversation at the moment? So I completely understand your point around maybe the thin end of the wedge aspect to it in terms of age verification, but I also feel like that it's becomes much more a conversation now, and I feel like that must have an impact on platforms like Roblox in terms of increasing some of those safeguards.
I can't say really, to be honest. I think that my impression is that they were doing a lot already, and now they weren't talking about it. And I think that, and this was a problem that Disney, I think Disney, look, we there were bad articles about us too, right? People just don't remember that. But, and, hiding behind the Disney name is like, there's
did that scare Disney, do you think?
What's that?
And did that scare Disney? Was that kind of one of the reasons that they might have ended up becoming a bit lukewarm in terms of their support of the platform?
Well, no, it didn't scare them. But they started realizing it was like the theme park business, where there are pedophiles in Disneyland too, right? They never talk about it, but that whole place is low jacked with cameras and face recognition, and there's no more Orwellian place on earth than Disneyland or Disney Park, right? They have to do that to keep those kids safe, and so. I think that, but they don't talk about it, right? And so one thing that we did at Penguin is I did a summit one time where proactively, because we were proud of it, and I was like, look, this was during the whole COPPA 2 debate, and so I brought a bunch of kids media journalists, David Kleeman was one of them, but a bunch of people like this up to Kelowna, and we took them through how we do it. They met with the moderators. Like we really, we took them through every aspect of how we do safety. And we were very honest about, look, we're encountering this stuff. I mean, man, I would get stories about some of these kids and how they were being abused or wanted to commit suicide or whatever that would curl your hair. And I would have to get on the phone at Saturday night or Sunday night or, whatever. My head lawyer would always say, if we have any chance of going to heaven, it's because of the work we're doing right now. Right. It was like, we would, fortunately Disney had, a former FBI, very senior guy running security. And we had great connections with law enforcement, especially because of the parks, because after 9/11, they had to be really on top of terrorism. And so we were able to use that infrastructure to, to legitimately save kids' lives. But Disney didn't want to talk about that stuff. I did, right? Because I thought it's like people need to understand that what, the internet isn't safe, and Club Penguin is trying to be the safest place on the internet, but that doesn't mean that we're ever 100% safe. And a lot of what we tried to do in our advocacy and our social giving and other things was to do educational programs for kids to help them understand, like, you have to take responsibility for your own online activity. And this is, I raised my kids this way, right? Because I raised them with Club Penguin and they know about all this stuff, right? And as a result, like, they have not been as, let's say, promiscuous on the internet as some of their peers, because they understand that the internet, can be a great thing, but it also can be a very dangerous thing. And I think that what we have done is that we lie to everyone that, some corporation or, AI or some other thing is going to make the internet just perfectly safe for them. And they don't have to be vigilant. And the reality is that everyone has to be vigilant.
Yeah.
Because there are bad people out there trying to do bad things all the time, all day, every day. If Dave came out and told you how many kids Dave have I bet he gets hundreds of kids a week, if not 1,000 a week, who go online and say they're going to kill themselves. And I would bet you all of those are getting referred to law enforcement and they never talk about it. Right. And so people need to, and to a certain degree, you could talk about, well, how appropriate it is to get into that. But that's the dark side of all this that no one wants to talk about, but I can, because I'm kind of out of it. But it's hard, right? And I think you have to, and I can say that, right? And people will listen to me and go, oh yeah, he's saying it's hard. It must be hard. He has no agenda to lie to me. But if Dave says it, it's like, well, he's just saying that. Now he's whining. He's making excuses. And it's like, no, it's hard and you have to constantly go at it. But if you have a focused effort, you can keep it mostly safe. And mostly safe is better than most of the internet.
Yeah. And I remember reading Juice Van Drunen, who writes a gaming newsletter, Super Juiced, he, after the Hindenburg short-selling kind of alarmist report that was, 18 months ago? Just over a year ago, I forget. But he published his newsletter with a table of reports from one of the centers for child exploitation that monitors these reports and active investigations in the US. And Roblox came in behind Pinterest, lower than Pinterest, for reports of child exploitation and investigations. So again, there was all of this alarm, and the Hindenburg report had been launched, and everybody was going crazy and pausing projects when it was behind all of the Meta platforms, but it was even lower than Pinterest.
What happens with Roblox, and I found this in some of my research, is that it's exactly the same problem we have with Club Penguin, which is that it's too hard to groom on the service itself, but you can meet people and then try to drive them off the platform to some other service. Yeah. And the thing is that that the predators they're really good at what they do. They're really good at convincing these kids that that they're to interact with them, right? And they're also and a lot of these are kids who they may be on the spectrum or have other psychological issues or developmental issues or whatever. That's why they socialize online, because they struggle. I'm not talking about everyone, because everyone's on the internet, right? But your hyper internet people tend to be the most socially
vulnerabilities, basically. Certain vulnerabilities.
So they're more vulnerable, right? Yeah. And they're lonely. And now somebody pays attention to them. And then these groomers are very good at the other thing is they find ways to, we used to call it dictionary dance, but ways to use emojis, or, they come up with code for the app they want you to go to, or for the account they want you to follow, or whatever it is, right? They come up with a code that is hard to detect. And then because they're not just saying go to Instagram and DM me at whatever, it's in code, but the kid knows the code, or they figure out the code, or they search somewhere else. They put two together, and then they meet off platform, and that's where the bad stuff happens. But they meet on Roblox. And so this is the thing that's really hard, is that Roblox gets a lot of grief, but if you look at the cases that turn really bad, where it really gets bad is outside of Roblox, where they can't control it. And this is the hardest hole to close, is I met someone and then I go somewhere else problem. And it's a game of whack-a-mole, because the code always changes, the tools that they use. Like, all these people do is sit there and try to find ways to lure kids off your service into unsafe places. That's it. And they work in groups, and they're often friends for things. Like, for example, we got hacked one time. We were getting brutally. I mean, one of the things that really killed Club Penguin was we were getting botted at just insane levels, right? And during the Star Wars party, which was going to be this huge event, right? And everyone's trying to log in, and we got savagely DDoSed. It turned out Disney had no DDoS protection as a company. None. Zero. For Disney.com, for any of their sites, no DDoS protection. So it took us, days and days and days and days to get DDoS protection, all while, because we had to come up with it, because Disney had never been DOSed before. Never been DOSed. And so we were like, well, how do you, surely, like, you're a big corporation, big name. We just never encountered it before, so we didn't need it. So we're dealing with all this, and then we wind up hiring, it was so material on our business that we wound up hiring a private investigation firm to find out what's going on. Well, what we found out was that it was a group of kids out of the UK and France. They would find these, what they called script kiddies at the time, the kids who, especially with Flash, it was very hackable. And so they were looking for exploits. So what these kids were, and there was a guy behind them, and I think we eventually found him, but I think he was a hostile foreign actor. I don't think that he was just a like a hacker. I think he was maybe affiliated with the government or something. And he was using these kids. He told them how to hack it. And so they were just running these scripts and doing this stuff. And they thought they were doing it to get free stuff. Like, we're going to get, free costumes and legacy items and whatever. But what they were actually doing was they were like running at the electric fence, to draw the current off so he could get through. And he was basically piggybacking off their efforts. And he was inside Disney systems. He was pulling scripts from the studio, doing all kinds of stuff. So there's all kinds of stuff like this that happens out there, right? Constantly. And all you can do is fight it,
Whoa, there's some real war stories there, Chris. That's unreal. So this episode's going to go out the week of GDC. What do you see as the current state of play for kids gaming? What are the hopeful spots? What are the lookouts? I mean, I think we've gotten into safety and you've given some really great context there. But what else are you
kids gaming? I mean, kids gaming kind of died in a way after Copa, and this is part of the reason that I don't love regulation. Is what I realized is that the regulation, if you were a legitimate actor and you admitted that you were making stuff for kids, then you had to follow all these laws, and the laws made it harder to make a good business. And then and you were competing against actors who had significant kid audiences, but didn't admit it. And so they didn't have to follow law. And you were at a real disadvantage. And so that's what was going on with mobile, right? Is kids were a massive part of the mobile game playership. Remember Smurfs Village, that controversy, right? There were tons of kids playing mobile games, and the mobile games were unrestricted in monetization and in activities, all other stuff. And kids just kind of moved from traditional games to from kids games to whatever their parent had on their phone. So the kids gaming business outside of Roblox kind of collapsed to, preschool kind of stuff like, I'm forgetting the Canadian group that just closed, that was doing, that did kids games, but was really good at it.
Sega, not Sega Mini. Yeah, I know. Educational.
Yeah, them too, right? There were Sago and Tokaboka was one, and then there was another group in Canada that did licensed kids games. But there were a few, but really the kids market kind of collapsed, and then Roblox took off and brought it back. And so I think that in many ways, kind of the kids gaming market is, the kids gaming market and Roblox are the same thing now. And Minecraft, right? Those two things really absorbed the kids market. My kids all went on to Minecraft after Club Penguin. One of my kids still plays it. That's kind of defined kids gaming. So I think the kids gaming sort of is the future, has pioneered the future of where we're headed with games now, which is really the creator culture, because, where we're headed is, games that are more like content that are deployed into these social networks that, the gaming social networks like Roblox that, or Minecraft, right? That where the creators of that content are able to monetize, right? And build their own little cottage business. And some of them much more than a cottage business. And so I think that Roblox is I don't think people understand what Roblox really is, because it's a architectural and business model shift from the gaming of the last, of the console era and the mobile era. I always say, I was just on a podcast earlier where I was saying, look, Roblox is the new console thing, right? It is everyone keeps saying, when's the new console going to come out? There isn't going to be a new console that changes gaming materially. The new console is Roblox, right? Yeah. And to a lesser degree, UFN. And so this creator era is where we're headed. And then you get into this new set of problems, which is, okay, now I can have hostile actors who are not just on the player side, but they're also on the developer side. And so Roblox is seeing this with like, you know, all kinds of like gambling mechanics and, you know, and, you know, loot box mechanics and stuff like that, that some of which I think there's too much fear factor and kind of engineered, uninformed BS, that like loot boxes are fine, right? Like this whole thing around, I know half your audience is passed out, but you know, loot boxes are fine. There's no one, you're not going to go to, there are no AA meetings or 12-step programs for loot box addicts, right? It's just, it doesn't exist. Like, you know, like if a kid opens too many loot boxes and they run out of credits, they have to go back to mom and ask for more Robux, right? And mom can say no to that. So the idea that like loot boxes are the problem, we need to ban loot boxes, you know, like there's much more insidious mechanics that I think people are, and you know, this is a culture that at one level wants to ban loot boxes and is mainstreaming prediction markets. Like we're completely schizophrenic on the message that we send culture to our kids. You know what I'm saying? Like if you're under 18, you know, we want to act like it's Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And the second you turn 18, you know, it's
go and sign up for Fully Market and Kalshi. Yeah.
and OnlyFans and stuff like that. It's the dichotomy is bizarre, right? But you know, the thing to me is that so you know, handing game development over to creators creates those risks as well. But I think that where we're headed is a more egalitarian form of game development. If you want to be a game developer, you're not going to come up like a lot of us came up, which is like, you know, you go get some job in a studio, or maybe you work in QA and then you kind of work, or you work in, you know, moderation or something and work your way up. It's going to be that you vibe coded something and you put it out there and you got some traction and people noticed it. And, you know, more of kind of the way I would imagine that the YouTube to Hollywood kind of pipeline, right? You know, I'm a YouTuber and I learned to edit. That's how I got my editing skills. And maybe I went to college and maybe I didn't. And so I just think that Roblox is the big disruptor. You know, I mean, there's really, if you read Matthew Ball's report, there's sort of two big things that are impacting gaming right now. And it's Roblox and it's China. And you know, China is a whole other kind of rabbit hole we could go into. But, you know, from a Western perspective, the big disruptor in gaming is Roblox. And I only expect that to continue. And I think what's that?
I think a wise woman said that on a podcast about a few years ago and many times since.
I said years ago, but
we'll have to check our reviews on that.
Where they're headed with AI.
I appreciate that, you know.
I happen to where they're headed with AI, right? On Roblox, you know, Dave announced that they're doing an MCP, which is Model Context Protocol. It's a way to integrate AI with
and you can generate models like that now. Yeah,
you'll be able to generate models, code whole games, all that kind of stuff. I think that there are architectural reasons that I could go into that it's going to be difficult for Unreal or Unity in their current form to incorporate AI at the level that Roblox is. And so I think that Roblox is almost uniquely benefited technologically or uniquely situated from a technology standpoint to benefit from AI. And so I think that plus the creator monetization. I mean, one thing I've learned in Web3 is that, you know, this generation, they understand that when they're creating content. See, when we were doing Club Penguin or a lot of games of that era, community was something you got for free, right? So it was like, I make a good game, and of course there's a community, and that just happens, right? And over time, people figured out, wait a second, I'm creating a lot of value for these games. how do I benefit from this, right? And by the way, this is becoming not just a hobby, but kind of a second job. I'd like to be able to make some money. And as the creator economy starts to happen, because a lot of these kids also grew up aspiring to be a YouTuber or a TikToker or whatever, they think with that psychology. And now that they can do that in gaming, I think that approach is going to be kind of the primary approach that people come to the games industry. That's where they're going to start. And so the creator economy plus AI plus the fact that Roblox is a cloud gaming platform, not a client side platform, which I think is one of the big architectural problems with a lot of the game engines is they're still artifacts of packaged software and like downloaded stuff. And so the fact that Roblox is a social network, right, and has social effects like a TikTok or an Instagram or whatever, all of those things just kind of make it evolutionarily more adapted to where the future is going in gaming. And I think that,
Chris, I think kind of you kind of what you put your finger on there for me is that what I've always thought was an obstacle for social gaming platforms was that, unlike YouTube, where you could literally just get your phone and video yourself and upload it, it took quite a lot of work to build your own game. But I think AI provides the kind of the ability for everyone to become a game creator in a way that just wasn't kind of feasible before. So it really amplifies that platform for Roblox. This has been a kind of fascinating discussion, kind of sobering as well. Although I was wondering if in some ways it's something that we spoke about on a previous podcast, that maybe the best way to safeguard children is, rather to have a ban, is just to make sure that platforms like Roblox are kind of responsible in terms of the moderation, because that's safer than kids having a VPN and then going onto those platforms that way, really. So it kind of it made me think that it's kind of a more responsible way.
I think it's also with AI, you can keep the parents more informed of what their kids are doing than ever before. Yeah. And I think that we have to empower parents they are our distributed moderation force, right?
Yep.
And they need to know what their kids are doing and without tattletaling on the kid every 5 seconds. Like, they need to know if their kid, if something happened, I have a friend who, contacted me because her daughter lost her account because some kid she brought, met online, stole her account and stole all her stuff, and probably sold her account. And, that was the first time she really, up until then, she'd just been giving her kid gift cards. Right.
Yeah.
And, she asked me what to do about it. So I gave her some advice, but I said, look, you need to, if your kid's going to be on a platform like that, you need to monitor what's going on, because you can't just rely on some corporation to catch it. They've got millions.
Yeah.
You've got, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think, and that's a kind of very powerful point. We could probably talk for another hour quite easily, but I know that's been a really fascinating discussion. Thanks so much for that, Chris.
Well, thank you guys. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
That was really, Chris.
Really loved it. So much more to say. We'll repeat.
We'll have to get you back for a second episode.
Yeah, happy to do it.
Amazing.
Beautiful. Take care.
Right. Thanks very much.
Bye.
I'll do a quick sign off. So thanks to Chris for being a fantastic guest, and thanks to you guys for listening. Please like and subscribe, and you can find us wherever you listen to your podcast, and we will see you next week.